Welcome to the Connected Mom podcast, where we have real conversations, helping you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. I am Becky Harling, your host, and I'm really excited about today's conversation. Probably all of you are familiar with the famous love chapter, where Paul describes what love is. And you might be wondering, okay, that sounds pretty ethereal. How in the world do I bring that into my home? Well, our guest today is going to help us answer that question. Her name is Kim Sorrelle, and I've just gotten to know her this past summer, and she is delightful. She has written the book Love Is, and get this, she did a year-long experiment to figure out, can you really live out of 1 Corinthians 13? Welcome, Kim. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Becky. I love everything you do. I love you. And so I am so excited about this too.
Yeah. So, okay, you wrote this book, Love Is, and your subtitle is A Year-Long Experiment of Living Out 1 Corinthians 13 Love. Okay, start at the beginning. What gave you a heart to write a book like this? I mean, I would think that would be pretty challenging.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I have a hard time committing to an entree when I go out for dinner. So committing a year to something was a real stretch for me. But I just wanted to know that I was living right. I'd lost my husband. I had to figure out this whole new life. And God is love. So I figured if I lived love, then I would be living the way the Lord would want me to live.
Yeah. So, okay, you went to figure that out to 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul writes, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not love, I'm like a sounding cymbal. And I can't remember the whole rest of the chapter. And then it goes into love is patient, love is kind. And, some moms out there right now are listening to me and they're already feeling guilty, right? Because they know this morning maybe they lost it with their toddler who unrolled all the toilet paper in the bathroom, or maybe they just are frustrated with their teen because they're complaining about not having clean jeans for school or whatever, right? And so they're ready to turn this off, and we don't want them to, do we? Because this is possible, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I wish I knew when I was raising my kids, I wish I knew about love the way I know about love now. There are so many practical things and love is so much easier than we make it. It's not so complex. And by the way, you don't have to like everybody, but we are supposed to love everybody, right? So getting frustrated, of course, that's not showing love. Yeah, of course, we all have our moments, but there are things that I wish I would have known that I would do.
Yeah. And so this is going to be a guilt free conversation, right? We're going to declare this, you and me, Kim, a guilt free zone. How does that sound to you?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, because none of us do this perfectly. However, we can live out the love chapter in our homes. So, just getting real and vulnerable here, which love quality was the hardest for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, love keeps no record of wrongs was the hardest one for me. But I would say they all had their own things and their own challenges. And and thinking about your audience and thinking about moms, there are a couple that come to mind that because they were all hard to be honest. But like the very first month, Love is Patient. I always thought you wouldn't lose it when your toddler unrolls the toilet paper or your 6-year-old can't find his shoes and you're trying to get out the door. And instead of going ballistic, that you stay patient, and that's love that is patient. But I learned in that month that that's not what love that is patient is. You put love is or love is not in front of any word and it changes the meaning. So love that is patient recognizes that this moment, right here, right now, is the most important moment of your life. What's in the past is in the past. What's in the future is yet to come. So you are fully engaged, fully present in this moment because this is the most important moment. And I'll tell you, I stunk at this. I stunk at this when my kids were little. Like they'd be asking me a question and I'd be thinking about, okay, what time is soccer practice? What am I going to make for dinner? And not be fully engaged. And I think about like the times that I would stir the beans or whatever it was that I was doing, and my son Luke would just poke my arm. I think I had a bruise for years on my arm because he'd mom, mom, mom. And if I just would have taken a second, Becky, and I just would have turned to him and said, Luke, what do you need? He probably would have said, this truck is red, and then ran away. And so, yeah. So, anyway, that is love that is patient.
Yeah, because sometimes we think patient love means that we never lose our cool, we never get frustrated, but like that's unrealistic because even Jesus got frustrated, right? And he, loved people perfectly, but he sure got frustrated in the temple and flipped a few tables. He got frustrated, I think, with the disciples when they weren't really getting what he was teaching. So, how do we teach our kids that love is patient?
I think if you can start with your kids, if you can start real young, teaching them to pay attention to who they're with, to really listen to who they're with, and not be thinking, I just want to go run away and play, or I just want to go do my homework, or whatever it happens to be. But if they can learn at a young age to really embrace the moment and be fully there, I'll tell you what, when I learned how to do this, because I stunk at it, so I had to really practice focusing in and really practice not letting my mind just wander. But when I did, I hear things I never would have heard. And there's so much language that's nonverbal and inflections and voices and all of that stuff. And just sometimes we can make assumptions thinking we know what somebody's going to say, right? Based on what we know about them. And something else, I hear something else entirely different. And so it has changed my life living this way, recognizing the moment, being in the moment.
I love that definition of love as patient because I do think that's something we can all tangibly work at, right? And really just bring our full selves, our full attention to parenting and to our child and really being present with them in the moment. Okay, so let's talk about the fact that love doesn't boast, right? I mean, you and I are both grandmothers, so we've probably done the whole picture thing because we're excited about our grandkids. And I think it's fine to be excited about your kids and your grandkids. Hopefully you are, but how does love does not boast play out in our homes?
Well, anytime you are putting yourself above anybody else, anytime you're elevating yourself above anybody else, that is absolutely not love. That's not love, right? And so sometimes you just, or always, you kind of have to consider who you're with. And if you're with somebody that says, I want to see your grandkids' pictures and they're going to show you theirs, that's fine. That's not boasting. That's just being excited and whatever. But if you're with somebody that you get out the pictures, their eyes glaze over, and maybe they don't even have any grandkids, they couldn't have kids, or whatever their circumstance, then then it's boasting. Then that's not who you should be telling. And then you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for them.
Yeah, so there's really a motive behind it. I think that that's important for moms to understand. There's nothing worse, in my view, than being in a room as a young mom with other young moms who are potty training their kids, and their kids are all getting it and yours is not, and then you have the boastful mom who says, well, my child was potty trained right on their second birthday, and maybe yours is 4 and still can't get it. And that's just not helpful. Or the mom that brags much later, like, my kid just got into Yale, Harvard, and, Stanford University, and your kid's not sure they're going to get into the community college, or maybe they don't even want to go to college. So, how do we handle ourselves in those conversations? Because love doesn't boast, for starters, but how do we that are hearing that, how do we respond in love without trying to one up the other person?
I think sometimes it's being asked, waiting to be asked if, somebody's curious. Because it's like we want to share our world with people, right? Like something great happens. We want everyone to know, oh my word, this great thing happened. And there are people in your life that you go and you tell the great thing that happened, and they're so happy for you, and things are good. And then there's other people that you should either wait to be asked, or just think about before you say anything. Think about why you're saying it. What is your motivation in saying it? And how are they going to receive it? Like, are they the right person to talk to about it? Because the whole world doesn't need to know that your child's going to Princeton. Like, that's so cool and that's so awesome. And there are people in your life that are so happy for you. And there's other people that would be upset because their child's not going. So, yeah.
I think that's a really good point, Kim. And I think it's really good to ask ourselves in these conversations, do a little self management meeting perhaps and say, how do I want to show up in this friendship? Because we want the other person to really feel valued. And so much of these love statements are about making the other person that you're with feel valued and not just building yourself up. And then there's the whole aspect of teaching our kids not to boast. I remember being with a few of my little grandsons. This was a number of years ago, so they were small, and there's this competitive spirit between them. And it's like, well, I'm the best in soccer. Well, I'm the best in football. And I'm smarter than both of you. And, all this kind of stuff, jockeying for position. So, how do we help our kids not boast?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and that brings up something that I remember hearing years ago about Maury Povich of all people. And I wish I would have done this with my own family, but Maury was asked about his family and what his family life was like. And he said always Poviches rooted for Poviches, that they rooted for each other, that when somebody had some award, did something, won a game, whatever it was, the whole family celebrated. Everybody celebrated. And the kids had this celebration spirit about them because they're also being celebrated when something great happens to them. And so they just always rooted for each other. And I just think about it with my own kids, what a different climate that would have been with my own upbringing, because my brothers and I super competitive. And competition's great, but not at the expense of love. So yeah, celebrate.
I love that. And if you can cultivate that climate of celebrating each other's wins in your family from the time your kids are little, that's going to downplay some of the boastful, talk, grandiose talk about how great everybody is. Because a lot of times when people talk like that, it's because they feel really insecure, right?
So true, so true. So they feel like they've got to share something great about themselves so that they feel accepted or they feel worthy or valued. And the reality is, uh, there are times people want to hear us stuff, but most of the time they don't want to hear everything about us, right? And instead, to be able to turn it around and just ask about them, ask, who you're with, ask about them. It's fascinating learning people's stories and it's wonderful hearing about people's lives, right? And so, yeah.
And I think we can teach our kids to do that, right? We've had a number of conversations in our family when our kids were younger, and then now with the grandkids, like what does it look like to go to school and really ask somebody their name and ask them what they like to do rather than telling them all about you. And if we can teach our kids good people skills like asking questions, that's going to go a long way in helping them love other people well, because most people really want to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of human nature, I guess, to talk about yourself. But another thing maybe to consider is what you're going to say. How does it benefit the person you're telling? Is there any benefit to the person that you're telling? Because a lot of times we talk. I just had this experience yesterday. I was talking to one of my daughter-in-laws, and she has one son at Bowling Green University, and he's mechanical engineering is what he's studying. She has a daughter who's a senior in high school, has no idea what she's going to do. I have a grandchild who is way closer to me in my area, who is a senior 4.0, very driven, involved in everything, and is applying at big universities. And she wants to do biomedical engineering and then be a doctor. And she's always been that way, just more driven in grades. She's never gotten anything but an A. And so I was talking to my daughter-in-law about what she's going to do for school. Where is she going to go and whatever. And she's hoping that her daughter gets into the community college, or a smaller university or whatever. And then I thought, oh my gosh, like my daughter-in-law roots for her niece. There's no doubt about it. But there's a line where it gets to be too much, where, it's okay, we can stop talking about her now. So, yeah, recognizing that line.
I think that's a good corrective for those of us who are moms of adults, because we can be talking to one of our adult kids and we're really excited about what's happening in another adult kid's life. But we really need to bring back the conversation to the person we're with. It goes back to that first statement you made, that love is patient. It really means love is present with the person you're with and really focused on them. Okay, one of the chapters you have in the book, and I love this, is about not dishonoring. Love does not dishonor people. And I think we're living in a culture that is very polarized and very dishonoring of people. And I think it's easy for that to seep into our home, where we can become really critical of others and dishonoring. So talk to us about that, and how does that shape our home life?
Yeah, it shapes it greatly. And there are things that you can do once you recognize it that can change everything. So when you don't dishonor, so people will say, I love everybody, right? I mean, you've heard people say, well, I love everybody, but those darn Democrats or those Republicans, right? Well, then you don't love everybody, right? And so people are not the labels that we put on them. People are these masterpieces created by the master. Like, if the Mona Lisa ever went up for sale, who knows how many millions of dollars, millions and millions, Jeff Bezos or I don't know, Elon Musk or someone would pay for it, because it's a one of a kind masterpiece. And so are you. And so are your kids. And so are your friends. Each one of us was created to be exactly who we are. And to give people the freedom in your mind, in your spirit, in your heart, to be who they believe they're created to be without judgment. We're not supposed to judge. Don't judge. I don't know about you, Becky, but I don't know that I've ever been before this whole love thing. And I, still, of course, try to not do things that are not loving, but been in a conversation with somebody that becomes a confrontation because voices rise and the other person changed their mind. You don't normally get the other person to change their mind. Right, right. Yeah, exactly. So when you are thinking that your way is better than somebody else's way, your life is better than somebody else's life, your politics is better than somebody else, your church is better than somebody else, whatever it is, when you elevate yourself, that is so dishonoring, because we are all walking on the same earth. We all have our feet on the same ground. We are all equal. We are all loved by God, every single one of us. God created in his image, and God is love, not God loves. God is love. So we're created to love this way, but I think we lose track over time.
Yeah, that is so good, Kim. And I even think this plays out for those of you maybe that are divorced, right? And so you divorced your spouse and now you're perhaps both parenting your kids. And I think this is a really important principle, because the temptation could be to dishonor your former spouse in front of your kids. And that's pretty damaging, isn't it, Kim?
Yeah, it's so damaging. I mean, you see it play out over and over where it is damaging, and the couples that are civil to each other don't say bad things about each other are able to still have a family together and work together for the kids, even if they're living in two different households and with other partners. It just makes such a difference to be able to not do that. I think of like um, people over the years, somebody would say, oh my gosh, you got to pray for so and so because she's going through this, and wondered, is the motivation that you want me to pray for somebody, or is the motivation you really want to share this juicy little nugget with me, right? And so, which is also dishonoring. Like, we don't, we people are critical enough of themselves. We don't need to criticize people. We don't need to tell, if it's their story to tell, let them tell their story.
Well, and I think even like for spouses that are married, I've noticed this tendency, when wives get together, it can turn into a complain fest about their spouse. Even if they're still, happily married, it's like, oh, my husband this, or oh, my husband that, and that can be such a temptation. But that's again dishonoring, which is not loving, right? And so we need to be honoring the people that are in our family and the people outside our family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And something to think about is when you're doing that, you got a friend, she just had a big fight with her husband and she's mad, and her temper's up, whatever, blood pressure's up, and she calls you, she just needs a listening ear, and you agree with her. Yeah, he is a jerk. Yeah, I can't believe he did that, right? Yeah, you're right. He is. Well, in a couple hours, she's going to be settled down and back in love with her husband, and you're going to be the person that was calling him a jerk and was agreeing with her that how bad he was, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to listen, let somebody vent. It's another thing to give it back to them when it's not your story, it's not your thing, and it is so dishonoring.
I
Absolutely.
I think that's such a good point, Kim, because I think in our current culture, and I mean, I teach principles of empathy, right? Where you make the other person in the conversation feel heard and like their feelings make sense to you. But there's a balance, like what the story you just shared. Like there's a balance. You want to empathize with your friends without diving in and trashing their spouse with them or their kids or whoever they're mad at. And so, like, learning to be honoring of other people, I think I could be wrong, Kim, but I think it's one of the most current needs of our present culture. That we have got to recover our sense of honor. Because even in the political realm, right? So we have two different candidates, and you might lean one way or more toward the other. And the easy thing for us to do is to just completely tear down the other. And that's dishonoring, right? Because scripture tells us we're to pray for our leaders. We're not to tear them down and say, oh, they're morons or they're stupid or they're, insane or whatever. And so we've got to be careful that we're really living this out. And I loved that in the book you had a whole chapter on what it means to not dishonor people, because I think it's so crucial right now. Then you have talk to us about the chapter on love always protects. I also love that one because as moms, we are protective, right? And, when somebody hurts our kid, I mean, I can be the nicest person on the planet, Kim, but if you hurt one of my grandkids or my kids, I'm going to take you down, right? Because that mama bear comes out in me. So, but there's a balance there too. So, what does it mean as moms that love always protects?
Yeah, well, I mean, some stuff is absolutely natural and you should do, right? Your kid's going to walk out into the street, you're going to grab them, right, and protect them from getting hit by a car, or, somebody attacks your kid, you're going to go and you're going to battle because that you need to protect them. You want to protect them, and that's so true. Sometimes though, we take protection way too far, and we try to shield our kids from everything. We try to like put, I don't know, bubble wrap around them or something, and protect them from everything. And uh it can go too far, and it can go too far in how you act it out. So if you're protecting your kid and there's a fight at school, a disagreement at school, and you're in there, calling the kid's parents saying, your kid did this to my kid, or the teacher calls you in and has something that wants to change about your son or daughter, and you're like, that teacher doesn't know anything, that teacher's bad. Well, what are you teaching your kid in that? What kind of skills are they going to take from that? And, we're protecting even from a bad grade. So some people will sit and just kind of do their homework for them so that they can turn it in so that they can not get a bad grade. But when we protect that way, when it's like a helicopter parent, when we protect and overly protect in a negative way, it has negative consequences. It's not helping your child, it's actually hurting your child. It'd be better for your kid to get a failing mark on that test or on that homework assignment, because that's when they learn. They don't learn by you doing their homework for them. They learn just the way we learned. Like everybody learns through this stuff we go through in life. So you got to let your kids go through stuff, or I recommend, I say you gotta, I recommend you let your kids go through stuff. If it's not going to kill them, let them go through some things. Don't bubble wrap them, and let them be kids.
I think that that's really important to bring out because ultimately, love always protects means that love looks towards the end goal. And the end goal is really a resilient adult who can face hard things in life because they know they can trust in Jesus. And when you dive in to save them from everything and you try to really take the place of Jesus, where you're saving them from everything, you're going to run into problems because your kids aren't going to learn how to be resilient. And we need resilient kids. We need adults who can cope because when they leave your home, they're going to cope with hard things. And if they've never been taught how to do that, that's going to be a massive problem. And so in some ways, I think love protects uh, to my line of thinking means love sees the end goal. Okay, what am I trying to do here? I'm not going to protect them from every situation. I want in the end them to be resilient adults. Let me give you an example. So, my granddaughter is in seventh grade, and there was like a situation right out of that movie, Mean Girls. And this girl was being really mean to her, kicked her out of the friend group because she sat with another friend. And my granddaughter was, so sad. And seriously, this is confession time, Ken. I almost texted her this morning and said, you tell that girl that if she says anything mean to you, your Mimi's coming to get her, And I thought, okay, that's not really teaching her resilience. I want to teach her, look, this girl, it might not be, she's not a good friend to you, but you can cope with this because you're a wise seventh grader and you love people well. So we have to guard ourselves from being overprotective, even though love always protects. It kind of protects the person's reputation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a way that love protects, is if you're in a conversation and somebody starts putting down somebody that is a friend, or maybe even somebody that you don't know or whatever, but mostly if somebody that you do know, they're putting them down, they're saying bad things about them. Love that protects would speak up and say, that's not what I see in that person. I don't see that. That's not my experience, whatever. And it's okay to speak up. And something funny, Becky, that I found is that when you are in an environment where women, it seems like it's usually women, are saying not nice things about somebody, if you do speak up, the next time you're together, they don't say not nice things around you. They know that you're not gonna that you're not gonna take it. They know that you're gonna protect the person and look for the good. So you really only have to do it one time, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I love that so much, Kim. Well, Kim, we are almost out of time. And so I want you to tell our audience, first of all, where they can connect with you and where they can get this great book called Love Is.
Well, I am literally the only Kim Sorrelle spelled my way in the entire world because it has way too many letters. There are two R's, two E's, two L's, Sorrelle. So kimsorrelle.com is my website. Love is available everywhere, some brick and mortar stores as well as Amazon and all the online booksellers. And it's got a dark blue cover, and it's easy to find. Kim Sorrelle Love is, and so I'm easy to find, and so is the book.
Yeah, and you have a podcast. Tell them about that. We'll put all this in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah, I do. I have a podcast that is a celebrity interview podcast, and so I interview people from The Chosen, or from some Christian movie coming out, which is, those are so fun. Or I interview people like you, Becky, authors that are out doing something great in the world. And so that's a fun, it's just the Love Is podcast. And so that's a good time.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, Kim. This has been just incredibly delightful. And, moms, I hope you are challenged. Why don't you take a couple of minutes this afternoon or later this evening, maybe after your kids are in bed, pull out your Bible and read First Corinthians 13 and ask the Lord, how can I begin living like this in my home and in my relationships? We're so thankful you joined us today on the Connected Mom podcast. And we hope you're going to join us again next week, where we'll have another conversation to help you connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. And hey, if you liked today's episode, would you please share that with your friends? Because chances are they need to hear this too. Thanks for joining us.